Hello, everyone. My name's Judy Stenmark, and I'm the new CEO of Consumer Healthcare Products Australia. So this is 7 weeks into the job, and I'm really delighted and excited to be here this morning and open this webinar. So this, of course, is a topic that we all love to talk about, and it's evolving all the time, as we know, in terms of social trends and consumers, what they do, what they like, and what are their expectations. So just to let you know, we'll have a Q&A at the end if there's time. And also we're recording this, so we'll be able to share it with everyone. So let me introduce our co-presenters and co-speakers, and they're both co-founders of Bread Agency. So first of all, we have Amo Tregueux. Amo is the co-founder of Bread, as I just said, and he's a specialist social media agency person focusing on social commerce. But prior to this, he was executive director of social at Red Havas, responsible for the social teams across Australia. And he, over the last 13 years, has worked in the digital space and worked with a lot of clients and people who are our members as well. And also Mary Poole, who is co-founder of Bread, and she too has extensive experience in the health and pharma space. And she's really established herself as the go-to expert for some of the world's best-known brands, seeking to deliver innovative social media marketing and programs. So let's get on with it. I'm going to hand over to Amo and Mary.
Thank you, Judy. Hi, everyone. So thanks for the intro, Judy. That was perfect. So yes, we will spend like an hour of your time. So thanks for giving us an hour of your time to kind of cover some of the social trends that we believe would be interesting for you when working in the healthcare, kind of pharma healthcare industry. But we could have picked heaps more trends, but we tried to kind of keep it contained. In terms of us, very briefly, because we don't want to do any hard sell here, we are the story selling agency. So we love to call ourselves like the story selling because ultimately what we're doing is using the power of social to sell or to convert for your convert for brands that we work with. As we love to say, we live and breathe social media, so you don't have to. In terms of the services that we offer pretty much everything that you would expect from a social agency. So, from research, strategy, the content production. We also do kind of community management. Some of us are also trained for, adverse events. So we know that part, as well as like kind of, reporting and analytics. Looking at our clients, so this is a typical slides with a bunch of logos just to show that we are legit. So like our clients at the top here are obviously our current clients. So we're working with Aspen in this industry. We also work with Abano Healthcare, range of dentistry, as well as Connect Hearing, which are hearing aids. But previous experience, we've also done a lot of work in that space. So yeah, we know the intricacies of your space. We understand social media, and we understand the Medicines Code of Conduct, the TGA, even the CHP kind of like guidelines that helped crafting actually. And so so that's kind of something that we understand. That's it for the hard sell. And again, we don't want to do a hard sell. So let's get into it. In terms of like what we are going to cover, as I mentioned earlier, we will cover like 7 trends. Again, we could have picked way more, but let's see the ones that we believe. But to start with is like, what's interesting is like, 24 hours, that's the average amount of time Aussies spend each month on Meta, TikTok, and YouTube. And just for the fun anecdote as well, we are checking our phones 7.8 times per hour. And I know it's crazy because I probably spend even more time. And for the ones that I've got connected to watch, I can't even imagine the number of times that they are watching there's notifications coming up. But that's kind of, to show kind of the importance, I guess, for us, for everyone of our screens. And one of my favorite stats is we scroll on average 91 meters per day on our phones. And that's only the scrolling, for the ones that are still on the dating scene. Can you imagine the number of tap right, slide left, slide right? So that's obviously even more so. So All this to say, obviously, we live in that kind of, I guess, in that age of infobesity where we kind of, there's a lot of content. You are competing. Your brand messages are competing within kind of those kilometers of scrolling. So you need to be kind of, super clear about what you want from the content. You need to be obviously thumb stopping to kind of create that interest for the audience to take, to pay attention. And obviously, kind of, the paid social plays a very important role to make sure that you're targeting only the people that you believe are right for the brand messages. But now, in terms of health, so we were looking at this on TikTok. I know some of you would not be familiar too much with TikTok, but obviously it is important, especially in the health industry. So there's 11.1 million posts on TikTok with the hashtag health. And then wellness has got 4.3 million posts on TikTok. And that goes literally from kind of, the product experts, covering things that, here you see nurses talking about like kind of health issues, but you also have like kind of, everything in between. So, like you've got the naturopath, you've got the dentist, you've got the GP, you've got even surgeon covering kind of some of the key tips and things that you need to know about the health industry. Again, very important to consider TikTok, and I will cover this in a minute, about the importance of TikTok when people are searching. It's not only now Dr. Google, it's also Dr. TikTok, if you like, where people are actually going straight to TikTok to understand how to fix whatever they've got to fix. All right, over to you, Mary.
Okay, so I guess with all of that, you can see, and we're probably preaching to the choir when we say this, but it is really important, I guess, with the volume of content that's happening to understand what some of those social trends and shifts are, especially within your category and space, so that you can meet the consumer expectations. Because as Amo said, that thumb stopping content is really important. And so making sure that you're keeping up with what's actually happening and what consumers are expecting will help you cut through. So the first trend we want to talk about is world building. And I think before we get into this, it's really important to look at how we've got here. So I guess if you think about the trajectory of social, we kind of started from this really perfectly polished and curated feeds and content, etc. So with that, obviously, there starts to become a counter shift in something that's a bit too much of anything. So from perfectly polished, we then started seeing brands talk to their audience like they were their besties. And you saw this quite a lot in terms of everyone trying to sound like your cool friend. It didn't matter if it was your grocery store, if it was your healthcare professional, whoever it was, everyone started to start speaking like they knew you better than they actually did. And things became maybe a bit too personal when it came to social. And because of that, when everyone's trying to do something different in terms of that originality and personality, everyone starts to feel and sound the same. So where that kind of lands is we almost overdid authenticity. When everyone's trying to be authentic and doing it in the same way, it really lost its meaning. And so we're starting to see this uprising of brands starting to have a bit of fun with how they're creating their content and bringing their audiences into their brand across social platforms. And so this is where we really see the elements of world building. And it's almost a magical, fantastical story that has elements of the brand or the product, but it's kind of overemphasized and it doesn't feel like a chore for an audience to engage with or listen to, but they actually are interested and almost feel like they're part of the story, which is really amazing. So this example is from it's a celebrity coffee brand that has started, and really it starts to talk about not just the types of blends that they do, but how she actually brings that to life and creates some magic around the brand story. Another example of this on a much smaller scale, again, I guess the coffee shops, you can take a lot of inspiration from them. But one within Brooklyn is called Brooklyn Coffee Shop. And rather than following the stock standard approach to what you see across any food and beverage categories, they started to actually create almost a social TV show. So they have main characters that feature in every single episode, and they bring in different characters across the series, if you will. This has allowed them to amass millions of followers and in views, because what it does is it brought something fresh and unique to the category and to the audience, and the audience are now craving what's coming next and really getting engaged. If you look through their engagement in the commentary, people want to be a part of the brand. And I think that's the whole element when it comes to world building. It's creating something that people actually want to be part of. The second trend we have is all around redefining influence. And influence and influencer marketing is a term and a category that has needed some redefinition. So one of the things we see quite often in even the clients that we work with in some of the commentary is influencer content is great, but the audience actually wants to see how real people enjoy the products and services. And I'm sure you're very familiar with this as well. It's particularly important in the healthcare space, health and wellness. There's some like big lofty terms that are used across it. So people really want to validate some of that thinking with how real consumers and audiences are actually feeling about the products and the services. And it's no surprise, really. I think when you look at a number of different research pieces, this comes out time and time again, that there is a growing lack of trust in recommendations found on social media platforms. So this was a study done by Reddit. And so they obviously have, a bit of self-promotion in there in terms of trust on Reddit because it's consumer to consumer, but it is a very poignant consideration. And you see this quite often. And when we look at the category that you're playing in particular, trust and expertise within health and wellness is so important. And so making sure that who has influence or, what that kind of looks like in terms of recommendations on social platforms is really considered. But the good thing about this is I think when we start to think about and look at the evolution of social platforms. So if you are on TikTok, if you open up your TikTok app and you scroll through your first 10 videos, out of that 10, you might not know or follow a single person from the videos that you've just seen. And that's because the sphere of influence is actually expanding. So what before was you had to follow someone or they had to have a certain follower amount to have their content seen. Now the content is more about, is it relevant to your particular interests of the time? If so, someone might not have a huge amount of followers, but their content is actually reaching a relevant audience time and time again. And so they actually have more influence over you than they would have had in the past. So what that means from a brand perspective is it's actually a great opportunity for you to start thinking outside of the the classic influencers that almost, a lot of people are working with. So you can start thinking really differently about who you're working with, who's featuring in your content, and who has that influence over the audience you're trying to speak to. If you want some inspiration on how to do this, the beauty industry does this really, really well. So this is a brand called Refy, and they are a makeup brand. And within the makeup category, I think a big thing that they would typically do in the past was they would take influencers away on trips. So they might fly them to different places. They would talk about their products, try their products, and create a lot of online chatter through those trips. But Refy threw that kind of playbook in the trash, and they actually brought their consumers on a trip with them. And
I'm obsessed with it.
this sound won't work here,
sure
but
all the girlies out there.
really it's an amazing opportunity to kind of bring in the actual consumer into your content and into your story. And they saw such strong success with this across their campaign. And interestingly, more and more, we're seeing brands who are only speaking to big name influencers are actually starting to get a lot of backlash from their audience because their audience don't feel like they're involved in the story or in the brand.
Just going back to this, so you won't be able to hear the sound. That's why we were like a few minutes late trying to figure this out. But what we'll do is that we'll share the deck at the end with David and the recording. So like this, you'll be able to watch all the different videos that we've got during in that presentation.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Google and Zoom are not friends.
Yeah.
But in terms of that sphere of influence expanding, we also then see the rise of closed spaces. So these are things where, you know, you have your public spaces in terms of your news feeds, etc. But you see things like broadcast channels. So broadcast channels, if you're not familiar, are a closed group on Instagram where brands can broadcast or communicate certain messages to a subset of their audience. And so you see these sorts of things popping up more and more, where some of your deep fans or your core audience have an opportunity to actually engage with the brand in a really different way. And you can have a lot, when it comes to healthcare as well, the types of conversations you can have in some of these closed spaces are much more intimate. So you may be, you know, Facebook groups is kind of the OG when it comes to this. And when in terms of some of the experience we have working in healthcare, we actually use the Facebook groups and closed groups quite often when it came to either even researching certain conditions or how people actually felt about certain topics and conditions to then influence how we developed marketing campaigns or social media content. So these closed groups are where communities really come together and they can have conversations with each other and with your brand. And it's not only, I guess, the audience in terms of the sphere of influence expanding, but we also see, and you may be very familiar with this in terms of employee-generated content. So I'm sure everyone's familiar with the term UGC in terms of user-generated content when it comes to social, but we're now seeing more and more the rise of EGC. And so this is how you are actually turning your staff across different areas of your business or different experts into content creators for your brand. And it's a great opportunity, again, going back to the trust and expertise that's required within the categories you're playing in, to how you can start to think about bringing them into your content. What is the role they play? How can they share that expertise on behalf of your brand? And what formats does that look like? And there's a thinking, you know, above and beyond the platforms like TikTok and Instagram, but how do you use that across all touch points of your communication? So in your blog posts, across other channels, etc. But it's a great opportunity when done well for brands to expand who they're working with and who can speak on their behalf. The third trend is all around entertainment, and that it really, when it comes to social content, is reigning supreme. This video that we had come across the other week kind of articulated this much better than I guess I ever could. But the whole thinking of before, it was you're either watching TV or you're scrolling on your phone or you're doing something, but you're really, there's a clear delineation between what you're using. That is no longer the case. So people are thinking about you're using, and you know, in this video, how she so perfectly puts it, you're using your small screen, your big screen, your medium screen. That's what you're doing tonight. So you may be watching your favorite program on TV and scrolling your phone at the same time. Or we even see the likes of, you know, YouTube. People are watching that actually on their screens almost more than they're watching TV. So really there's this merge of how people are consuming content, and you are competing with entertainment shows, programs, etc. to cut through.
Yeah, we could hear the sound on that one.
Oh, you could?
Yeah, so yeah, we can hear the sound.
There we go, David. I was trying to do it justice, and okay, well, that's great. Hopefully you can hear the sound on this one as well. So what that kind of means when it comes to entertainment, all the time in social, there's chat about like, oh, does it need to be 6 seconds, 15 seconds, 30 seconds? Sure, your paid media team are going to tell you there are certain placements and I guess timestamps that you need to hit. But when it comes to real storytelling across social, we're seeing that there's a real shift from story length being the primary goal to actually story strength is much more important. So I don't know if you would have seen this, but Paris Hilton and Hilton Hotels actually did this amazingly well. They created what is unheard of a 10-minute TikTok ad. So I won't play you the whole 10 minutes because we'd go over
And
time.
hopefully the sound works, because if not, then we'll have to skip. So David, let us know, please.
Would you like a 10-minute TikTok?
No.
Well, you should. Because Hilton believes it matters where you stay. And the people that stay with this TikTok for the full 10 minutes are going to have a chance to win Hilton Honors points, experiences, swag, and more.
Could you hear that?
We heard that.
Beautiful. So that was just the first couple seconds of that ad, but it continues on for 10 minutes. And what was amazing within that was the view through, right? So people continuing to watch it to the end was extraordinarily high. And that's because across the whole piece of content, they continue to put these little Easter eggs that kept people engaged and wanting to watch on till the end around what it was about.
Would you
And I think the interesting thing is also when we start to look at how that differs across platforms and channels. And so, before it was in social, it was, oh, you have a TV commercial, just put it on social media and that will perform really well. And that used to be the case, but it's not anymore. But what we start to see is you can have a singular story, but how you start to dissect that story and bring it to life across different platforms has to be considered. Again, just feeding into the fact that there is so much content and entertainment to be consumed by your audience. And so if you're lazy with how you're creating your story and just splashing it across your channels, they're not going to tune in. So this example in terms of this video does a great job of showing how you can have a singular story, but make it very different from what you put on your TV commercial and what you put on your social media feed.
La lune est libre, je crois, il rayonne au-dessus, rayonne au-dessus de toi. La lune est libre. La lune est libre. Open the Hotels.com app to find your perfect somewhere.
So that example obviously is both video content and from a TV to TikTok perspective. But I guess thinking about this in terms of other content that you're creating. So if you're creating blog content or other written formats, how can you actually start to think about how does that transform into social content? So really when we work with our clients and start thinking about this on behalf of them, it's how do you take one story that works for your brand and really sweat that across your channels and your platforms to make it work hard for you and to make sure that that message is landing in an entertaining way.
And so one of the other thing as well in terms of formats is obviously what we call edutaining content. So it's delivering obviously educational content in an entertaining way, regardless of your category. So again, like the idea is really kind of, continue kind of, to push for your core messages, but trying to do this in an entertaining way. Because again, like, the reason why your audiences are following your brands on social media across all categories, it's not about like, like that self-promotion. It's usually, there's definitely a part of freebies, which you wouldn't necessarily be able to do, but there's also a lot about like, they want to know more about the brand, how to use the products, how to use kind of, specific things or services. So it's really about having that kind of educational value in the content. I'm going to share examples in the next slides, which hopefully works from a sound point of view. But some of the work that we've done with the Aspen team and Euro, and I think some of the Aspen team are on the call today. But yeah, over the past 2 years, we've been doing a lot of like kind of, different type of videos for them. So like the first year we did like kind of a video series with 6 different videos. And then we just finished like kind of a new project with them again, talking about UTIs. But have a look at like kind of the different examples, and it just goes to show that you can do the educational and entertaining way in so many different ways. So the first one, again, David, please let us know if the sound works. You can always.
They ask what I bring to the table. Soothe that painful UTI burning sensation? That's me. Help you get on with life? I got you, boo. Offer you a choice between 2 flavors? Of course. Effective relief from the pain of a UTI? You bet. UTI? Think Euro.
So again, quite simple, very simply kind of put together. Obviously, it was all about the power of the scripts, but then the imagery is quite simple to kind of to execute. Then we went in Bondi, where I used to live. So again, imagine this in a TikTok environment. All those ones are paid ads. overperform like kind of all the other brand assets that were created. So very native to the TikTok kind of environment. And then the last one, which we just finished like kind of a few weeks ago.
I know you're here for scrolling, not schooling. Oh, listen up. 3 letters, your bladder dreads. UTI. A burning sensation when you pee. An urge to pee frequently. I think a feeling you can't ignore. Sound familiar? This little Euro sachet helps relieve these symptoms, aka your bladder's new bestie. Fizz the burn. Get your comfort back. Euro's got you. Got a UTI? Think Euro.
That's again like kind of pretty much the same messaging across the three videos, but put differently. So again, think about this when you start looking at like kind of some of the content that you create. Is that too self-promotional? Are you actually educating people about something? Obviously, the last example is the typical teacher elements, which brings even more educational in just that format. The other thing that we wanted to share to you is SEO and SMO. So SEO, you are all familiar with search engine optimizations, which is obviously how you help your content get resurfaced on kind of across Google. But we are getting into the SMO era, if you like. It's social media optimization. So pretty much, like people are searching across social platforms. So it could be TikTok, could be Instagram, directly within the search bar. If some of you are loving TikTok, you can have even a widget that sits on top of your iPhone where you can directly start your searches within that widget. So best way to cure a headache. And so people will actually look directly within those search results. So again, very important in the way we build strategies or the way you create your content strategies is making sure that whenever you create a post, a content series, a video, whatever it is to make sure that even the captions, the tagging is done properly. So when people are searching for specific elements, they can easily see your content popping up in their searches. Again, best way to cure a headache. I was looking at this, a few days ago. There is like a lot of them, and that's again, very important for you to kind of tag it properly, but also kind of bring that expertise to life.
I think a good way, just a little hint and test, if you want to actually see if you are on TikTok, some of the other channels, and almost give yourself a grading on how well you're doing with tagging the right content or making sure that the actual bulk of the content, so the video asset itself, any of the text overlays and the copy are all aligned and being picked up effectively by the platform. When you scroll through at the top, if you've done it well, it will have a keyword in a little search bar around what that video is about. If you haven't necessarily nailed it, it will just say search in TikTok or find in TikTok. So it won't actually have a keyword associated with it. And I think it's, if you have an SEO strategy, relook at that and use that in terms of how you're actually planning your social content, because it will have a big impact in terms of people being able to land on your channel and use your brand content as that guide. And if you are working with influencers or any creators, ensure that you're including some of those keywords in their briefs to make sure that, again, their content is showing up when someone is searching for that particular topic that you want to be known for.
And talking about another hot tip here, one of the things that we do when we do those strategies is looking at obviously a lot of different kind of tools and platforms to help us dissect what people are searching for. So obviously you might have an SEO strategy, which is fantastic. Sometimes you don't. So, but looking at like what people are searching for on Google Trends, or like an amazing tool called Answer the Public, which is free for 3 queries per day per IP address. Basically helps you kind of look at like a specific term or a specific kind of, like it could have been a headache, for example, and then you narrow down like what are the key things that are searched, across Google and Bing over the past 12 months in Australia about headaches. So it gives you, and then you will see a lot of like different searches, the what, the why, the who, whatever, and that helps you kind of almost craft the type of content that people are expecting to find. So yeah, that's another one. The other thing as well is like, I know YouTube seems to be usually the dumping ground for kind of a lot of brands about their old TV commercials or their kind of, their long, boring kind of, instructional videos or anything campaign related. but really think about like how like the importance of YouTube. YouTube is really, as we all know, belongs to Google. It is the second biggest after Google, obviously, search engine. So really think about like your YouTube strategy, and going back to the SMO topic, if your videos are well tagged, and if your videos is obviously interesting enough, you will then be able to be discovered. And that goes also in terms of YouTube changes a lot. I've been changing a lot their interface. YouTube Shorts, very similar to Instagram Reels or TikTok. Again, those guys are really kind of copying each other to make sure that like you are still capitalizing on short form videos for obviously to make the audience discover the longer forms. So really think about your YouTube strategy as well.
Okay, the sixth one is a trend and also acts as a bit of a warning. So this is all around minding the music and thinking about when you are creating your content, just as you're creating the actual video, what is the sound or the audio that's going along with it? And the warning comes from the fact that labels are on the hunt for misused music. And so we're seeing this more and more. There's a big push for this in the States in particular, but we're seeing it here in Australia. And what that means is you might think that there is, a fun trending sound that you want to use, and you actually have access to it in your library across Meta or on TikTok. But the music labels are using AI bots to scour the web and pick up any of their artist music that's being used from a brand perspective that they don't have rights for. So you're seeing really, really big lawsuits in the States. So like Sony suing for 1.1 billion for Gymshark, which is a big fitness brand, or the likes of they sued Marriott Hotels for hundreds of songs used in their social media ads. And even one of the clients that we work with got done here in Australia. It wasn't $1 billion, thankfully, but it was about 15K for using a track on social media that they didn't have the license for. And the thing is, and this is where the confusion lies, where it's like, okay, yeah, but I do have access to that music when I'm on my brand account and I can choose a song. That does not matter. So you have to be really, really considered with, is this a track that I don't own, or it's not, what's the word I'm looking for? What are the
Licensed? Yeah. Licensed?
Yeah, you don't have the license for it. And it's not from like one of your paid for music subscription services. If it isn't, stay away from them because you ultimately will get done at one point or the other. And we always say it's better safe than sorry. So I would say this is also something to probably consult with your legal teams on just to make sure, to sense check what your comfort levels are from a brand perspective and what that looks like, because it's not just the content that's on your platform, but when you are working with any creators, so influencers, employee generated content, etc., if they are posting on your behalf and it's anything to do with a promotion that's related to your brand, or they've tagged you in it and they are using licensed music that you don't have the rights to, the influencer and the brand can also get done.
And what's the tricky thing as well is like, how people love using trending songs, like to create content. Sometimes that could be also a strategy, not that we wouldn't necessarily think that it's a strategy, but like, it's easy to jump on something that is already there, but yeah, you can't necessarily do this. So just be very careful. Whatever people are doing on the personal accounts is very different than what you can do from a brand point of view.
Exactly. And so what that kind of means from how you need to start thinking about your content and considerations is that brands need to think about how they're relating outside of trending tracks. And so if, we always say, yes, as Amal said, like jumping on trends is not a strategy. If it's a tactic that you're using, you need to think about that, how you can do that differently. And so a great example here is in the finance space. They're called Planet Money. And they have almost created their own, they use a lot of like voiceover and different types of audio or sound to make sure that they're still relevant on sound first platforms like TikTok, but they're not breaking any rules. And then on the flip side of that, we think it's a great opportunity to get really creative with how you're thinking about not just the content that you're creating, but the audio that goes with it. So the ARIA Awards actually have a new award that you can submit to if you're a brand and you've used an Australian artist to create a piece of music or audio that feeds into any of your marketing or social content campaigns. So again, we think like when there are restrictions, and especially big restrictions like this, it drives brands to have to think really creatively about how they get around it. I think the brands that do this and do this well from the get-go are the ones that are going to stand out. And then we get to the final trend before we can go into some of the questions and conversations around any of this that you might have. But this one is all around kind of shaking up the platforms in terms of how we're seeing them. So this trend is really based off of the fact that everyone is competing in the same places and on the same platforms. And when that's happening, how can you stand out? We see this time and time again when we're working with our brands and doing their audits across, the channels that they're on and the channels that their competitors on and who's performing best. And time again, it is Instagram and Facebook, so the Meta platforms, and now TikTok and YouTube, that is more of a dumping ground and not actually used effectively. So really the focus being on Meta and more so now TikTok as well are the key channels that everyone is almost trying to outpost each other on and outshout each other on. But what we think is a really interesting thing is when brands start thinking a bit differently than about their channel mix when it comes to social. So some really amazing examples, Unyoked. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Unyoked, but their big thing is getting out into the wilderness and into nature. So little cabins in remote places that you can get away and disconnect really. So they then saw a big trend on LinkedIn or within more broadly in terms of culture around burnout and overworking. And so rather than kind of feeding the fire when it comes to Instagram or TikTok around that high-paced content that's trying to grab attention, they actually moved their campaign to LinkedIn. And what they did within this was they did a big campaign around it. They partnered directly with LinkedIn, and then they worked with different professionals across the platform to actually go on an Unyoked skate and talk about how that had an impact on them and what that meant from a creative perspective, a performance and productivity perspective, and an overall well-being perspective. So again, it felt so fresh. And even when you were going through LinkedIn, we kind of talk about LinkedIn as almost the new Facebook now with everyone. There's almost a bit of oversharing that happens on the channel, but there are a lot of honest conversations about work and burnout and mental health. And so this pairing worked amazingly well, and it felt really fresh from anything that their competitors had been doing.
And in the category, which is a bit different, but Swiss and the Inspired Unemployed as well. Obviously on LinkedIn, I don't know if you saw this with like kind of the new range of gummies, which was kind of an interesting play as well. Very different. We do prefer the Unyoked example, but it was kind of a bit different than what we've seen before.
Exactly. And then we also looked at, Chipotle is a burrito brand in the States, or a Mexican-inspired restaurant in the States, or chain of restaurants, and they do some of their marketing really well. But you may be very familiar with the fact that run groups or this rise in kind of community health and wellness is very present and here, and it's having a big impact on how consumers are engaging with not just each other, but with brands. So what Chipotle did was they actually partnered with the running app Strava and created a campaign where you could actually unlock some product if you actually did certain runs and submitted that tagging Chipotle as the brand. And so again, it was taking the brand and thinking about where their audience are spending time in ways that they don't have to really compete with a lot of other brands. And this stood out extremely well, and it helped them align from that, fitness perspective in a way that felt authentic to them and really tapped into a current cultural trend that made sense for them from a brand perspective. So I feel like we've talked a lot and gone through. So the 7 trends that we covered was everything from world building. So really like throwing out the over authentic communications and kind of bringing the fun back into social. from a redefining influence perspective, how you can start thinking really differently about who yields influence within your category and for your brand, and how you can start to use them differently. When it comes to social, the fact that no matter what you're talking about, entertainment really is king. So you are now competing with the likes of not just cute dog photos and cat videos on the platforms, but with the likes of Netflix and some of these big entertainment players. So how is your storytelling keeping up? Which feeds into the edutaining content. So I think oftentimes it's really easy to think, oh, this is education or, informative content, and it has to almost be a bit bland and boring. But how do you really bring edutainment within that content to make it interesting? And then looking at how, when you're thinking about SEO and your SEO strategies, that's not just for your written content or for anything on your website, but how are you starting to think about that from a social search perspective? So bringing those keywords in to make sure that your brand is showing up when your audience are searching for them across social platforms. And then, of course, we needed to bring a warning in there about minding the music. So don't get caught. We do not want you to get caught with a big old fine. I'm sure you have many different ways to use your budget. And when you're starting to think about platforms and how you're reaching and engaging with your audience, think outside some of the stock standard platforms or platform use cases. Think differently about how you can almost hack the platforms to cut through to your audience and do it in a really interesting way. So Em always makes me put this slide in around choose your own adventure, around who you'd like to follow. So I'll leave that up for a second, but with the last 15 minutes, would love to really, I guess, open up the floor for some conversation and any questions that you might have.
Yeah, please, like kind of any questions about social in general, not necessarily specific to trends. Appreciate that trends sometimes is not necessarily prompting for a lot of questions, but yeah, let us know if we've got any questions. We can stop sharing, yeah?
Yeah. I've seen, yeah, we haven't been able to see anyone, but there's some chat.
Okay, so we do have a few questions.
Great.
Perfect.
One is from Berry. Hey, Amo and Mary, should we be showing less product and more of the emotional benefits of our brands when we're using social media?
Interesting. There's not like an overarching answer to that. I think it's think about how you're showing your products. If you can find interesting ways to bring your product into the story, talk about your product, because people are also there for information on what your product can do. So I think finding that really nice balance and start testing things. That's the beauty of social as well. There are so many ways that you can actually test what's resonating. So even if you created, a similar video, one was a bit more product focused, one had a bit more of an emotive hook or intro, put those both up, see what actually works better, and do that a few times to start to understand what's actually resonating, and that will help you evolve and tweak the strategy based on what you need to do.
Okay, thanks. And this is a question that a few of us had. You talked about the rise of closed spaces and where communities can get together. So should we, like CHP Australia and other people, other of our members on this call, on this webinar, should we be utilizing that? And if so, how do we do it?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Look, I think the key thing to consider is doing something like that is another stream of content. So if you are going to start it, make sure you can sustain it first and foremost. And I think sometimes clients want to, jump on things that are new or interesting. It's like, no, we have a bit of work to just get some of our other foundational bits up and running. But I think it is a really interesting thing. So you can do that both in digital spaces and you can do that in real life events, which I know you do anyway. So I think you're already doing that a lot in terms of bringing people together and things like this webinar, etc. But thinking about how, you can extend the conversations after some of those events happen, that will probably unlock a lot of power for how you could build on it.
All right. So we've got a few more, which is great. So when you're talking about redefining influence, you suggest that there's a growing lack of trust in some of these influencers. So are we seeing a decline in the influence of influencers, so to speak? Are people sick of it, I guess, or don't trust them?
I think they still play a role, so don't get us wrong on that one. I think it's just evolving. So like you just like using kind of a stock standard influencers and thinking they're going to sell out the brands for your brands or whatever. I don't think it's the right scenario. It's not necessarily the right thing to do. I think it's first of all a combination of elements, but having different layers of influence is very important though. And again, the way you do it as well, it needs to feel authentic. Like even the way we start, like when we start, like we pretty much every single campaigns, everything that we do for every of our clients, there's always a small kind of layer of influence, sometimes even bigger. But it's like making sure that whoever we reach out or whoever we identify are already kind of buying the products or buying the brands or buying into the brands, just because it needs to, the authenticity is obviously key for everything that you do. And then you can tap into, that those big tiers, you can go to micro, you can also look at employees and how they play a very important role, as well as like the community testers, like the UGC and how you kind of leverage UGC. Even from an affiliate point of view, if people are already fan of your brand, they're already sharing things about your brand, how can you turn them into affiliates so they actually kind of feels remunerated? I mean, they make money out of their influence as well.
One thing I might just add on that is one of the clients that we work with, we do have a pretty robust influencer strategy, and we are working with a kind of a mix of some of your, classic influencers who have some of those big reach and audience numbers. What we actually saw was if you're just working on a one-off basis, so it's they're doing a singular video for you or a couple posts, the results from that weren't as strong as when we brought that person on and worked with them across a number of different kind of moments or events. As the events increased and people were really familiar with, it doesn't just feel like it's a one-off kind of like pay to play relationship, but it feels authentic and it feels really aligned. We saw the impact of driving of sales, positive community management and engagement. And so I guess it's, to Amel's point, it's really thinking about how you're working with them and making that feel like it's not just a one-off and very tactical, but how it feels really relevant to the brand.
Okay, thanks. They're great answers. And talking about social media apps, I don't think you really talked about X, for example. But is X reducing in its impact, or are there other social media apps that are like reducing, not as powerful as they once were or influential?
Yeah, I mean, X/Twitter, obviously, we are big fans of them, but the reality is like in Australia, like their audience is very limited. So it's obviously very good for sports. It's very good for journalism, news, and breaking news. But like if you are looking at kind of the brands and the role of X for brands is obviously very limiting. So it works obviously amazingly well in Europe and in kind of US, in other markets. But unfortunately, and it's been like this for years, X has never been playing a very big role here in Australia, except for sports and breaking news, media, basically.
Okay. All right. So another question is about minding the music. Do we need to be careful that the artist or the music doesn't kind of, it's so good it overshadows the campaign? But also when you're engaging with artists to create pieces or use their existing pieces, are there steps we can take that we make sure we don't get caught up in celebrity controversy, which I think is really important?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess on the fact, music and audio can play a really powerful role in marketing. And so that. So I don't think it's not looking at how it overshadows the communication, but how it complements it is how I'd be really thinking about how you're using any audio or elements within your campaigns. But when it comes to, so a lot of the, you can go to a lot of, there's different managers or labels that you can speak to, and you don't just need to work with, I guess, the big brands and the big names when it comes to music, but especially within Australia, there is an amazing up and coming musicians and artists that I think it's really powerful for Australian brands to also celebrate that and work with them to collaborate. So I would say, look at different managers, look at different publishers, start just having conversations with them. If you do want any support, like let's have a chat. We work with some amazing, I guess, music consultants that when we have big campaigns, we'll bring them in to help navigate some of the conversations, because that whole industry is a minefield.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it is bring in the professionals so you don't get done who know the industry inside and out and have the connections that you need to make it happen.
And again, before even like looking at artists as well, is like, and stock libraries are not always strong, but there are some good choices. And then compositing is also one, like where it's like sound design and compositing, for example. So it's like more like the way some of those stock libraries work is that you can remove certain instruments. You can almost you can literally create a song from scratch. So that's the type of thing that we do. Even we're just about to do a TV commercial, and we filmed it last week, and we are literally at that stage of like compositing and making sure that kind of the sound is exactly how we want it to be.
Okay, and again, two people have mentioned this in the chat. About LinkedIn, which wasn't really the subject of today, but our industry, we use it a lot, and we use it to promote different things, maybe things we're doing, or showcase what the industry is doing. Someone was at a conference or meeting, but I think LinkedIn can be utilized a lot more, and there's so much more to it that we don't use it to its fullest ability, if you like. So have you got any thoughts on LinkedIn, especially for sort of health industries?
Big fan of LinkedIn, Judy. I ran, and I'm sure David might still have the recording, LinkedIn kind of webinars. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago now. So it's been a while, but like I think the principle stays the same. I think LinkedIn is such a powerful kind of platforms. As Mary said, it does tend to kind of now become almost the new Facebook, which is, I guess, like kind of the watch out is like you don't want to overshare on that platforms. It steals a professional kind of social channel, if you like, but when you look at the Unyocked kind of example that we just present, which is kind of just different, and I think different is great, especially when you are kind of trying to kind of talking about like work and being overworked, which happens to a lot of us here. So LinkedIn is a great one. I think sometimes it's been given to the HR team to run, and that's where it becomes also an issue, where it becomes just like kind of a job posting kind of element. I think it's really having a proper LinkedIn strategies where job posting plays a role, but there's also kind of heroing your key employees, as well as like obviously kind of making sure that all your content is getting out there as well. So it is you need to have a LinkedIn strategies, basically. Like it's not only one pillar, recruitment, or one pillar which is about like corporate reputation. And the other thing as well, so when I'm talking about LinkedIn, I think there's the role of the brand, and there's also the role of the executives and the team and the rest of your teams and employees. Again, very important to start thinking about like the overarching LinkedIn strategy at the brand level, but also the roles of the executives and then the employee advocacy that comes on top of this to complement some of the brand messages.
And get creative. I think it's like, you can still be very creative on LinkedIn, and so don't shy away from thinking about that, thinking about what other like cultural or more macro trends are influencing conversations outside of the platform, and bring that into how you're thinking about developing content and narratives for the platform.
Be edutaining, as we said before. You need to have like still always the entertainment level.
No, I couldn't agree more. And we are seeing people using it for personal stuff, which is not, we don't want it to turn into a Facebook. It should be,
I know,
but it can still be cool and cool and entertaining. Okay. Look, I think that was a great chat, and we had lots of questions and lots of interest. So we're almost at 10. So I'm going to close this session now, but I want to thank you, Amo and Mary. That was a really good session, and I think we can have a lot more of these, because I know there's preparation, but it doesn't take up too much of everyone's time, and I think it's just great to have these regular discussions on such an interesting topic as social media and trends and how we can use it. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.